Michael Lombardi. I'm Patrick Meagher. This is the Lombardi Line. Go ahead.
Patrick, I think it's really important as we talk about this that, with the Mike Williams news today, I think, you've waited this long, right, before you make a bet. And I think that by 5 o'clock Eastern time today or 6, I think we'll know who the starting quarterback for Baltimore will be. I don't think you want to make any plays until you know the whole situation. Is Armstead going to play in Buffalo for Miami? What's the offensive line going to look like in Minnesota based on the injuries? We know Brian O'Neill's on IR, so they're obviously going to start the 6th-round pick over there. But I think before you do that, we've waited this far. I think you should wait a little longer. And I don't, the Lions won't react as quickly as you think they might react. I mean, obviously a quarterback. I mean, Baltimore, whomever they decide, it's not going to change the line. Skylar Thompson, that line's up at 13.5 now. I mean, that's not going to, we know he's playing. So, but I think there's some of these key games, especially the close games, Minnesota to New York, where that line and the injuries are going to really tell the story. Same thing with Dallas and Tampa Bay.
The juice has moved a bit. Chargers, Jacksonville, of course, talking about the big news. When we started the show 31 minutes ago, Mike Williams was questionable. He has now been ruled out for tomorrow's matchup against the Jags. Of course, the wide receiver deep threat for the Chargers. Michael, the juice is adjusted a little bit again. It's a little overrated what you're going to have as far as line movement and receivers. Back in the day, Randy Moss could move a number. But again, I think you'll start to see some Jacksonville money coming in, as Ross Tucker said. But that is the big news as we come back. I'll just say it, and then you can tell me if you agree or disagree. If he goes there and loses to Jacksonville, there has to be questions about Staley's job.
Well, I mean, two is like there's questions about how much leeway do you give him. First of all, there should always be questions about Staley's job because some of the decisions he's made have not been good. Now, what I wrote about today, when you break down Staley from last year to this year, he has really curtailed his 4th down arrogance. His 4th down, I'm just going to go for it, I don't care. I think there's internal problems at the Chargers. I think that he's not happy with his offense. I think he maybe want to make changes there. I think the general manager, Telesco, is on a contract. I think there's a lot going on there. And, yes, I think this will be one of those situations that deserves to have monitored after the season because, look, if you lose this game and Mike Williams doesn't play, it's on you. It's on you. It's your decision, right? And you're paid to make good decisions. And every excuse that he's given, is the wrong excuse. Like I get that there's certain guys that have to play in the games, but the excuse he offered was crap, and then the excuse he offered about rest over reps was even further fueled that he's talking to both sides. If rest was so important, why didn't we rest him? I mean, they've played a lot of games. I think they played 3 games at least this year without Mike Williams. And one game that he dressed, he couldn't finish after the first quarter. So they've done it before. Now, they're not the same team without him. And I don't understand how I know that. Ross Tucker knows that. And when we talk about playoff weekend, we're talking players, not plays.
Let's cue up that clip again. Brandon Staley talking about Mike Williams. Elliot, let me know in my ear when it's ready. We'll play it. I think it's important to get that out there again just to hear the justification. There is, Michael, hear this. I think there's, maybe you can speak on it, maybe you can't, but it does seem as though he's off-putting to some because there's an arrogance. Here's Brandon Staley talking about the decision.
Just trying to get him as much rest as possible because of the short, time frame of the week. We're at that point of the season where the reps aren't what matter. The rest is, in his case. So just trying to get him as much rest up until game time. I stand behind what we did in that football game. I think, all my players are really important to me. And there were a lot of players that were, playing in that game that were in harm's way. That's just the nature of football. And it's very difficult to decide who plays and who doesn't and who's more valuable than the rest. And what you're trying to do is set a standard for your program.
I genuinely don't know what he's saying. I don't know what Brandon Staley's
I'll tell you exactly what he's saying, Patrick. He's trying to justify it to the owner. He's really not talking to the media there. He's talking to the owner. So why he brought up what he did was further to justify to his owner. There was no reason to go back on Sunday. There was no reason to double down on what he did unless you wanted to reinforce it to the owner. I mean, the fans already think it was stupid. You're not going to convince them any further. And so that excuse he gave there was directed towards the owner. That was all it was directed towards. And the bigger issue here is if you can't trust him with making this decision, if he thinks all the players are the same, then he doesn't understand playoff football. Now, arrogance is what, Staley comes from the John Carroll School, okay, which has got a zillion coaches all through it, executives and coaches all through it. It's kind of a, the Don Shula hub, and there's been a bunch of coaches, Josh McDaniels from there, Nick Cesario's, a lot of guys are from there. And Staley's kind of like from there, but he's really not in that group because he thinks he's smarter than everybody else. And that's landed him a head coaching job. And God bless him, that's wonderful for him. But he's going to get judged on his decisions, and his decisions as the head coach, his decision as the defensive coordinator of the Chargers, to me, have been less than impressive. This one, to me, is really bad because it affects the entire team. And if he's not smart enough to understand that Mike Williams is the most valuable player other than Herbert on his offense, I can't help him.
We work on a betting network. He was shaking die and rolling them in Denver because, literally that's what he was doing with Herbert. That's what he was doing with Williams. He was just throwing them out there and gambling that they would come back healthy.
Why would you play him one quarter? Why would you play? Brady played one quarter. I get it. Brady's got a streak of starting games. You play him. You let him get a little rhythm. Got it. Okay, get him out. Get him out. I get that. And I think if you wanted to do that with Herbert, fine. But Mike Williams has got injury problems. You know that. You can't risk that. Eckler has that too. Eckler's a tough kid. He plays through it. Bosa does too. Like Bosa's banged up too now. Let's not forget that. Bosa's not 100%. Bosa was in it. I don't say Bosa left the game, but Bosa was, I think let me get it right here. He's on the injury report. Let me see here.
He was on the injury report. Full practice yesterday, I'm being told.
Yeah, full practice. But, why risk it? You need him. You need him badly. You need him to be able to. So
I think you need Herbert. You probably would need Herbert. And my point is he was gambling with Herbert's health as well. And what Tucker just said, Ross Tucker was just joined us here on the Lombardi line on VSiN. He said you lose the locker room with a move like this. This is something where that arrogance will catch up to him.
Well, think about this. Ross makes a great point. Do you remember the Browns game when Keenan Allen wasn't playing and tweeted out, "What the F are we doing?" And then he kind of,
he's sitting at home.
He was sitting at home. And since that game, have you noticed how Staley has kind of cut back on it? Have you noticed that? See, that nobody ties the two events together, right? That Browns game was in week 6 of the season, week 5 of the season? Since then, he's curtailed it. He's punting more. So he knows that. That locker room, I think Ross is correct. I don't think that locker room has the same love for him that, they see the problems too.
Just a wild turn of events. So Mike Williams has been ruled out. If you're just joining us here on the Lombardi line for tomorrow's matchup, 8:15 Michael's time, 5:15 Pacific. Chargers, Jacksonville open. Chargers 1. Bet up to 2.5. We've seen the juice adjust a little bit, but we haven't seen the number adjust quite yet. 47.5 on the total. And Jacksonville, all of a sudden, do they defensively right now, are they having meetings about completely changing the game plan? He's been ruled out.
Well, I don't know if they'll completely change the game plan, but the one thing I do know is that their corners are not worried about someone taking the top off. Like you can survive. Like Keenan Allen's a really good player, but he doesn't force you to change the game plan. So now when Keenan Allen's on the field and Mike Williams on the field with Everett, that Herbert will throw the ball to any one of those three and he trusts them. Josh Palmer to a degree too. But now without Mike Williams, the options for him that can play it. Now you got DeAndre Carter. Is he going to play there? It becomes a little bit roll the coverage. They're not. They're what are they? 30th in the league in rushing. They don't want to run the ball. They never want to run the ball. So that when they need a play, where are they going to? Well, you were worried about Mike Williams making that 50-50 catch down the field. Now you don't have to worry about that anymore. Keenan Allen doesn't make 50-50 catches down the field. He makes controlled passes inside. I was leaning towards taking the Chargers all the way. I was leaning it as one of my picks. I really think they had a chance to go. But as I wrote about today, don't underestimate the level of involvement that the head coach must play this weekend.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.